Shalom, everyone, and welcome back to the Rabbi Avi Show, a production of Horizontal Media. My guest today is one of the most refreshing, unapologetic, and disruptive voices in Jewish and Israel advocacy today. Tali Aynalem is an Israeli Ethiopian American, an IDF veteran of the Givati Brigade, and a sharp marketing professional who is completely shifting the conversation on social media. Born in Israel to parents who made Aliyah, who moved to Israel in the early 1980s, Tali grew up in Oregon, giving her a completely unique perspective on both the Israeli fabric and modern American culture. We sit down for a deep hour-long conversation about her lived experience, breaking through the victim mentality on progressive American campuses, the hidden realities of the Middle East, and her exciting new grassroots project, Breaking Bread. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that this show is entirely listener-supported. If you value independent, long-form media that speaks the truth, please consider supporting our efforts by heading over to patreon.com/horizontal media. Now, here is my conversation with Tali. Tali Aynalem, welcome to the Rabbi Avi Show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I want to start by just saying that I'm super impressed by your Jewish and Israel advocacy work. I watch all of your videos on social media, and the clarity and courage you bring to this space right now is incredibly powerful. For our listeners who are just discovering your voice today, please take a moment to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about who you are and the many beautiful identities you carry.
Yeah. Well, my name is Tali Aynalem. My first name is obviously Hebrew, Tali, and my last name is Amharic, which is Ethiopian. I'm an Ethiopian Jewish woman. I was born and raised in Israel until the age of 10 to Ethiopian parents. My mom is an Ethiopian Jew. My dad is Ethiopian, but not Jewish. And a little bit about my parents, actually. I think that's they're quite interesting themselves. My parents went to school together, like in grade school. Our families knew each other from back in Ethiopia, but they sort of lost contact. My mom went on to make Aliyah to Israel in the early 80s. A little before the operations. I know a lot of people know about the operations, but Ethiopian Jews have been in Israel since the late 70s. Ethiopian Jews were granted the right of return to Israel in 1973. And so I have some family that's been there since the 70s, my mom in particular since 1982. And then in 1990, my mom went back to Ethiopia to bring her brother back to Israel, and her and my dad ended up reconnecting. And then they got together. I was born in Israel. My dad moved to Israel. And they built a life there. And then my dad got an opportunity to move to the United States in 2001 when I was 10 to get his PhD at Oregon State University. So that's where we moved. And I call Oregon my American home because this is where I feel most at home in America. And so, yeah, I grew up in the States from the age of 10 and have been living here. And then at 18, I went to the IDF. I was in Givati, which is a combat unit. I was not a combat soldier, but I was admin support on base. And yeah, I've been stationed on the Gaza border and Judea and Samaria, Golan Heights, and all around. And then I came back to the States. I went to Portland State University. I studied communications and have been working in marketing for sort of a decade or so, and have been doing this advocacy work for less than a year now.
Well, I got to say, there's so many things to unpack there, so many things. But for me, with a musical ear and an ear for accents, I really was attracted to the fact that you speak English without, as a regular American West Coast accent, and
Right.
but the message that you have is is so special. And of course, the identity, as people will look at you and they just think, oh, maybe she's an African American of, similar
Mhm.
background of other people they know, and then they find out how special you are. Obviously, there's not a lot of Ethiopian Jews in America, certainly not in Portland.
Oh.
So it's great. I mean, it's sparse enough being a Jew in America, let alone to have such a subcategory. I'm before we kind of get deeper in, I'm curious what made you want to go back to Israel and serve in the Israel Defense Forces at that point when you were living a comfy life in the United States.
I don't know, and it's funny because I try to think back at like my 17-year-old self and think like, what made you do this? But I just felt like that was like the natural progression for me. I knew that, my cousins back in Israel are all in the military, and like that's what you do when you turn 18. When you're out of high school, you go back. And I just felt like that was the next thing for me. Even though I have a younger brother, he's like 3 years younger. He didn't feel that same way. But I just felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't really know if there was like a definite moment or in time where where I made that decision, but I just felt like that was what's meant for me.
I want to start, before we go any further, by opening a window into my own past that makes having you here incredibly meaningful. When I was a boy, my mother, Zichron Livracha, often read me a children's book, which taught me the struggles of the Jews of Ethiopia, their rescue by Israel, and how our brothers and sisters from Ethiopia were starting a new life in our ancestral homeland. The book, you may or may not be familiar with it. The book is titled Falasha No More, and
Mm.
it permanently shaped my awe of the Ethiopian Jewish journey. Then in 1985, I visited Israel for the first time and stood in admiration of the new immigrants arriving from Ethiopia. As you said, your mother made Aliyah before that window, before the massive global headlines of Operation Moses or
Mm.
Operation Solomon. When you think about that specific generation of early pioneers who paved the way without the world watching, what do you wish the public understood about their unique courage?
You know, I think whenever I think about Ethiopian Jews or Jews as a whole, I think about our longing for Jerusalem, and I think that it sort of like gets lost in the conversation of the operations where it's like, oh my gosh, the Israelis, rescued Jews from Ethiopia. Amazing. Obviously, like as Jews, we need to help one another. But I think that it's like if you think about Ethiopian Jews who had been living in sort of like a solitude for so long, the longing was there. And a lot of people who had, came from Ethiopia and had no idea of the Western world and sort of media came to Israel and they thought that they were going to see Beit HaMiqdash. And, just that long for Jerusalem to see it the Beit HaMiqdash, it's just so powerful and so beautiful. It's almost like naive, because we know so much now within the media, but that is like what the Jewish soul always longs for, and I think that that's just such a beautiful thing to sort of look at it that way.
I mean, I've certainly heard those stories of, as you're describing, our brothers and sisters coming from Ethiopia, not knowing that the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, was destroyed, and makes me kind of choked up because these are people that were actually mourning the destruction of the temple in real time in the 20th century. It's unthinkable. It kind of speaks to exactly what you're saying. Aside from that, like discovering that the temple was destroyed, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and not realizing we're not exactly going to Yerushalayim to make that sort of a pilgrimage quite yet. Hopefully, b'mehera v'yameinu, we will have that opportunity. But as you said, your family has another fascinating layer. Your mother, as you said, went back to Ethiopia to bring her brother to Israel and reconnected with your father, who comes from a non-Jewish Ethiopian Christian background. You grew up, I suppose, experiencing both traditions before your family immigrated to America when you were 10. How did navigating that distinct mixed faith household shape your personal spiritual identity before you transition into an American environment?
Honestly, there wasn't much of a mixing of backgrounds when we lived in Israel. It was sort of we just sort of operated as Jews, as Israelis. So there wasn't really a mixing of background. It was more so when we came to the States where there was, the Christmas, and also my dad's side of the family lives in the States. So
Mm.
there was sort of the mixing when we got here, but not so much when we were not really at all when we were in Israel, and also when we came to the States, it was my mom sort of made sure that we were really rooted in who we were, especially when we came in to Corvallis specifically. That's where Oregon State University is. We were really connected with the Jewish community, and they sort of like helped us even just get acclimated to the United States. They helped us with everything. So, yeah, I think it was more so as we got older that there was sort of that mix.
I know you've spoken about this in other platforms, about your relationship and the struggles with the general African American non-Jewish community in America. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because I wasn't really introduced to sort of like the Black community or African American community until I was in college. So this is like post IDF, because I grew up in a Corvallis, Oregon is very small when my dad was getting his PhD. Also went to McMinnville High School, very small town in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. So I didn't really grow up around Black kids. High school had like 14 Black kids, and it's just there wasn't that Black culture as I experienced in college. So once I was out of the IDF, and in 2014, I went to Portland State and I got a scholarship through this program called Access. And in this program, I had to take a class with this professor, and it was sort of like how to help Black kids navigate college, which, I think it's great in theory, but it sort of introduced me to like being Black, which is such a weird thing to say because at that point I think I was like 22. And I remember this vividly, but in the class they were talking about how because I'm Black, I wasn't going to be able to get certain opportunities, certain jobs because of my skin color. And I said, what are you like it was, as an especially like post IDF, I'm Israeli, like I'm not even thinking in this way of like limitations. I'm thinking I've gotten of course, at 22, I haven't had very many like, crazy jobs, but I said, I've gotten every job I've interviewed for. Like, what are you talking about? Anything that I want, I can get. And I still, obviously hold those beliefs. But at that time, I was sort of being introduced to the Black sense of who they are essentially in this world. And so from then on, I sort of like took that on and believed it, which is really sad. This is why they say that you get brainwashed in college. Um, I know, sad, but I sort of got, within the Black community, and like I was in college, I was also a part of the JSU, like Jewish Student Union, and I was I was a president of the Cultural and Historical Association of Israel, and I was part of Stand With Us, but I was also in the Black Student Union. I was also in the African Student Union.
Nice.
And obviously it was great because I was able to sort of bridge a gap, and we were able to like do different activities together through those clubs. But I just felt like there is sort of like a black cloud over the not the African community, but the Black community, because it felt like the black cloud is sort of like the mentality of it all. Like I understand racism, and for a while I sort of said like this is just who they are. Like they've gone through so much, like racism and slavery, and you know what I mean. But I think that over time, I sort of realized, like, that is so long ago. And I also,
Mhm.
like, want to compare it. I always would compare it to, like, my parents grew up in a village in Africa, you know? Like, look at where they are now.
Are you trying to say that, you really didn't notice the fact that you didn't feel, "I'm a black person," when you were in Israel? That's not the feeling that you got. 'Cause, I mean, that's also, like, your parents grew up in a village in Ethiopia. You're very much fr your heritage is from Africa. Obviously, your parents come from Africa, from East Africa, and you you mean to say in the quote unquote apartheid states, where the world is convinced that the Jewish state is built on racism, that you were not made to feel, I'm a black woman, or I'm a black girl, young lady, in Israel, and you only were introduced to that kind of mindset of racial awareness to that level when you were in university in America.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It was like it was almost like somebody's telling me that I'm black for the first time, and that's, like, such a weird thing to say now, but I always used to tell people, like, I didn't know racism existed until 2014. Like, I found out racism existed in 2014, which is, like, such a weird thing to say, but up until that point, there really wasn't I wasn't thinking about how people were treating me because of my skin color or who I am in relation to my skin color, you know? In Israel, we talk about r we don't talk about race, we talk about I don't even know what to call it, Eda, like, my eda shelach, when people ask, like, "What is your background?" Like, that is sort of the conversation because we just wanna know, like, what is sort of the food you're eating? What are your minhagim? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a
Right.
conversation of, like, where do you come from so I can sort of judge you or place you in my mind in this, sort of background, you know? So yeah, it was a very sort of eye-opening, but it was just brainwashing essentially because at that point, it was sort of the beginning of because my brother will tell me I sort of have, like, amnesia, if you will, but I don't
Mhm.
really remember, like, college and, like, the way that I used to think about race and things like that because I was I hold my beliefs very, very close to me, so what I believe now, I feel like I've believed it my whole life, but, obviously that's not
So
true.
what does your brother say?
My brother always says he was like, "You were like a Black Power sort of like, girl, like you were like anti like, Republican, anti this, pro-Black, just like believing everything." And, because the thing is when they teach you these things in college, they played it up for you in such a way that you consume it. If it makes you think that this is so intellectual and so smart that you're like, yes, of course, like, I'm oppressed because of XYZ, and it's like, when you think about it with, like, with a clear mind, you're like, what are we even talking about? This doesn't even make sense. We're making ourselves victims for no reason. We live in the freest country in the world. We can be whatever it is that our hearts desire. But it's like when you give I don't even remember what what the term is, but it's like if we say like Obama was president and he was black, they'll give you a term as to why one person doesn't represent everybody. And it's like we just want to it's like we just want to be victims at all times.
Right.
I don't even know how to explain this, but it just felt like that's also just not even in my spirit to be
Clearly.
a victim, And I think that's like not the spirit of any Jew to be a victim. We're just not even those types of people.
It's hard for us because we don't wanna talk about what the wrong that was done to our people, because 'cause we're all about moving past it and succeeding, and yet
100%.
our our, uh, our enemies, like to, make up all sorts of stories, or kind of add spotlight to stories that don't deserve as much spotlight as they give. And meanwhile, we're not talking about the Farhud or the oppression of the Jews in Ethiopia. I mean, all the throughout North Africa and the Middle East, all of our brothers and sisters, Mizrahi brothers and sisters, not to mention everybody. I mean, even the amount of doubt today that people have on the Shoah, on the Holocaust. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like we're living in a time where it's not at all popular to believe that Jews have been oppressed, and at the same time they long to oppress us and um, to persecute us. And so it's kind of a strange dichotomy. So you've got all that, and I just want to say, I don't know if you're familiar with. There's a book. Coleman Hughes. Are you familiar with Coleman
Mhm.
Hughes?
Yeah.
His book really kind of, in his narrative, he kind of speaks a little bit similar to what you're talking about. He didn't look at himself as a black man until he was told, "Oh, you're a black man," and then he has a totally different um, explanation to what that all means, and what in this whole race business. And I've talked about um, the way that race has been manufactured. I mean, obviously we have a real history with oppression toward African Americans in this country. It's deplorable. Some of our history. There's also a context to it. It's not like it happened and the rest of the world was just totally clean. I mean, it was happening all over the world, still happening in the Arab world, by the way, oppressing black
Yeah.
people, in the Muslim world, and nobody talks about that. So we have our difficult history in America with African Americans, with Native Americans. It's disgusting. And yet, like you're saying, it's not that we're not in that point in history, even though racism is real and it still exists and there are challenges. I mean, you're living proof that that's not the case. I like to say, Nigerian Americans, I think, are the least incarcerated group of Americans, and nobody knows that. So it's a lot
Yeah.
more complex. And in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, people are not black I mean, that's not how people identify. You identify in a much more, and just like in Europe, people don't identify as white people in Europe. They identify as, I'm Greek or I'm Swedish or whatever. It's just this whole American business of saying you're white. And first of all, I don't consider myself white. I consider myself Jewish, and my people were never considered white in Europe. And so it's a whole American overlay, and it's very troublesome, and it's inspirational to hear, how you've navigated those waters. So just kind of switching gears, you mentioned in another interview that in 2019 your parents retired and chose to move back to Israel permanently, um,
Yeah.
and where your father now speaks fluent Hebrew and loves it. Um, there's a beautiful irony there. So many people chase the American dream, yet your family realized their ultimate peace was back in the Jewish homeland. Tell our listeners about what home actually means to your family.
Yeah. I mean, home has always been Israel. I think my parents came here with a mission. They always say, like, we moved to America so you can learn English, so you can have opportunities. And I believe that. I think that that was like their mission because they stayed here for a little under 20 years and made sure that we were set. And then they decided to go back because that's just like where they felt like they wanted to retire. I also think that if you are somebody who grew up outside of the Western world, like if you grew up in Ethiopia or in Israel, you never quite feel like you're home here because it's sort of lonely. And I don't know how to explain this. Like you can have family, you can have your neighbors, but it's not a community like it is in Israel. So I think they wanted to, just be able to just go outside and go on walks and there's people around and, go to Shabbat at, family's house and just sort of have that sort of community that it just doesn't feel the same. I don't really know how to explain it. And obviously, if you've been to Israel, if you've lived in Israel, you understand that there is just a vibe that you cannot find anywhere else. And I think that that's where they feel at home. They haven't been back since either. So it's like they're staying there and they'll go on vacations to like Europe and stuff, but they don't really care to come back to America. So they've always just felt like that was home for them.
So you got to go there to visit them, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
I was just there for like 2 months though, like November to January. I was there.
Was it hard to come back to the US after that? How's it for you?
It was. Honestly, I have been thinking like I want to go back, but it's also if you know Israel, you know how hard Israel is. Just the great things that make America great are convenience and like the ease of systems. Um like we think that the DMV is bad, the way that but the DMV has nothing on like how to use the bank system in Israel. You know what I mean? It's like things are just much more difficult in
And
Israel when it
strangely
comes.
enough, then you mentioned the banks. I mean, our listeners might be shocked to hear that yeah, it's a little different in the banks, including nobody bats an eye when somebody walks in the bank with an M16. You can walk into a bank in Israel with a loaded gun and nobody thinks you're going to rob the bank or hurt anyone. So it's
No.
a whole different but it is difficult. It's hard economically. It's hard
Yeah.
with the lack of peace, that we're longing for that peace, but we're not there yet. So, those of us who are American Jews, there's a reason why we're, hanging out here on our comfy couches, as I like to say.
Right. But I will say, like, Israel will always be the place that I will imagine, like, the rest of my life in. That is, like, where I would love to retire. And honestly, if I somehow came into, like, millions of dollars tomorrow, I'm moving to Israel. Like, that is sort of what I think about. It's like the resting place of the rest of my life.
Yeah. Ken Yirbu. I hope that it happens soon. Just remember the little people. More than a few years ago, it was actually back in 2016. I had the privilege of working closely with a now prominent Ethiopian Israeli leader, Leah Avuno, while she served our Jewish community here in Tucson as a Shinshinit. She was doing, for our listeners, she was doing a year of service, like a gap year after high school before going into the Israel Defense Forces, serving the Jewish community here in America. Watching her build bridges was incredible, but it also highlighted a gap. In America, the Jewish community often treats Ethiopian Jews as a recent novelty or a fascinating exception. Yet you've noted that in Israel, your community is a foundational part of the cultural fabric. What's the biggest blind spot American Jews have when it comes to understanding the everyday reality of Ethiopian Israeli life?
I think that's a great question, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is so interesting how in Israel I'm Ethiopian, but I'm Israeli, right? Like that is just what I am, and I think people obviously realize that I'm Ethiopian because my skin color, but there is no like, oh my gosh, you're an Ethiopian Jew. Like like most people don't even really know about the operations. Like if you ask like a regular Israeli, that's just sort of just like how you'd ask sort of like an American about American history. Like they just know that Ethiopian Jews are there. And now we've become such a fiber of the community that, we have people in the Knesset, we have famous people, we have singers, rappers, just like so we have become such a part of I even want to mention like I don't know if people follow like Big Brother. Israel is like a big show, Big Brother, but like there's always like somebody at the end that's almost winning or have won Big Brother that are Ethiopian. Like we're really just a part of like everyday culture. In America, it's sort of like people love to talk about the operations, and it's great the operations happen, but when you meet a Yemenite, do you talk about Operation, what is it called? Magic
Magic
Carpet.
carpet, right?
Yeah, you don't. And it's sort of like, can we stop talking about the operations? Because the last operation happened like 1991, 35 years ago, you know? Um, I, for myself, like I obviously was born in Israel. My mom didn't even come on an operation. My mom has 9 siblings. 3 of her siblings came on an operation. The rest and her parents, my grandparents, came regular, like by plane. So I think
Hmm.
there's sort of this idea of like, oh my gosh, like we helped the Ethiopian Jews to come to Israel. And it's like, that is great, but that is like such a small story of who we are. And like now that we're here, there's so many greater stories. I also like when I was in Israel, I sat down with this guy his name is Indal Kabeda, and he had a show that was like the #1 show on the Hot Network in 2024 called Indal. And it's like people don't even know about like and it was like a full Ethiopian cast, and it was such a great show and people were talking about it, but people in America are still sort of talking about things that have happened in the 90s and 80s, so um
It sounds like
yeah.
the bottom line is that Ethiopian Jews in Israel, and I'm so pleased to hear this and to know this, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I was going to say, Ethiopian Jews have succeeded and it's not like they're recovering from the long journey. By the way, I mean, it was horrific. I mean, I do want
100%.
to mention, I mean, so many people died, and lost their lives and on the way to Israel.
Hmm.
Just it was secretive, and no country in the history of humanity has rescued black Africans to give them freedom the way Israel has.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands, and the way that the Ethiopian community is succeeding and prospering, and I'm sure there's still lots of challenges, just like every
Yeah.
community, but the bottom line is they're not Ethiopian anymore. I mean, and when they lived in Ethiopia, they weren't Ethiopian, they were Jews, and now they're in Israel, and they are just Israeli people. And
No.
by the way, when you go, and I hope that listeners out there go to Israel and see with your own eyes, you won't believe how many Muslims there are in Israel. You won't believe how um, you won't believe that Jewish Israelis don't look like a bunch of white colonizers. They're very dark, of all different skin colors and complexions, and they're the happiest people. Israelis are super happy, and Ethiopian Israelis are no different than any other Israeli in that regard. They're happy people.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
On social media, your comment sections are often, I'm sorry, flooded with toxic claims from critics who say Israel treats you like a second-class citizen.
Hmm.
And you've pushed back hard, noting that while racism exists everywhere, the narrative of systemic exclusion is really a projection. When you are walking the streets of Israel, as we're talking about, what does your actual lived experience of belonging look like compared to the fiction being pushed online?
I'm a regular person. In Israel, I'm like such a regular person. I always tell people are more surprised that I have an American accent when I'm speaking Hebrew than like who I am. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, why are you speaking to me in an American, like, aren't you Ethiopian? Aren't you Israeli? Like, aren't you from here? Why are you speaking to me with an American accent? So I think people are more surprised by that. And everyday life is so regular. I always like to say racist people, like racism doesn't exist. Like the way that we think about racism, this like overarching systemic, like weird sort of ambiguous thing of racism does not exist. Racist people do. I've never experienced racism, but I'm sure it happens. You know what I mean? So it's like there are racist people, but in terms of like Israel, I feel at home. That is like where I feel like I belong the most. That is where I just feel like at peace at all times. I don't have to explain to anybody who I am, where I come from. It just is who I am. Like I feel like, and I always tell people if you say anything about Israel, you're saying something about me. So it just is where I belong the most. I also like to mention that when the people that make those comments of like, you're a second class citizen, the white Jews don't accept you, it's almost comical because I know that that is coming from an Arab person because in their countries, I am considered second class. Like that is just, we know this. If people don't know about the like ongoing slave trade that we talk about in the Arab world, it's called the kafala system. The kafala system is a system where people can come in from other countries into countries like the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia as well.
Probably Bahrain too.
Yes, and all those countries and can come in on a working visa. The way that that works, though, they take your passport as soon as you land, and that passport is with your employer. Your employer can be a regular, schmegular person with a house that needs a maid, really. And they can decide how much you get paid. They can decide when you leave, if you can get another job. You do not have a say on anything. Once your passport is with them, you're essentially like you have no way to leave, essentially. And I was actually just talking to my aunt's husband about this. He on my dad's side. So he had his sister was working in Saudi Arabia and they were abusing her. And he had to call and say, I'm American. Like, you're going to get in trouble if you don't let her leave. And it's sort of like situations like that. Like, what if she didn't have her brother to call it and say, let her leave? Like, they were abusing her. So it's sort of like this under the radar slavery system that's like just not good. And it's like, we can look at places like that where, or like places like Dubai where they were having immigrants from like Nigeria building buildings in the heat of it all and like actually not paying them. And so in those countries, everywhere essentially in the Middle East, I am a second class citizen. But in Israel, I'm not. That is literally where I feel at home and people treat me like anybody else, honestly.
You served in the Givati Brigade. It's a very prestigious brigade, stationed at various times along the Gaza border, Judea, Samaria, what some people call the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. In the West, media outlets often portray the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, as this faceless, aggressive military machine. But you've said that when you look at the army, you just see your brothers, regular kids trying to protect their homes. How did that close-up reality of military service change how you view the human cost of Israel's defense?
It's sad, honestly, because it's so, when you're able to sort of, humanize the people that are dying for our country, it's very different. And I think it's probably very hard to like, American listeners or people who sort of live here. Like you hear the numbers, you see the pictures, of the soldiers, but when when I just see when they're allowing publication for somebody that has died in the field, it just sort of takes me back to being on base. A lot of when we're not in war, you're just hanging out. Like I always like to tell people, like the IDF is sort of like a big summer camp. Like we're doing a lot of work during war, but if there's no war, you know, if people don't know how this sort of the IDF works, but like if let's say you're stationed on the Gaza border, you have a team. I don't know what to call them. Like I don't know military terms in in
Could be
in
a
English,
brigade,
but
could be a platoon, probably a brigade or something like
I don't
that.
know. I don't know military terms in in English, but
Mhm.
your team is like you have a team of let's say 100 soldiers. Half of them are going to go into the territory along the borders and just go up and down like if there's no war. Just doing sort of security. And so it'll be like 12 on, 12 off, and you sort of like go back and forth. But a lot of the time that you're on base, you're sort of just hanging out. You're cleaning your gun, you're talking around, you're making sure that you're fed. Admin, we do our paperwork, but like we're just hanging out the entire time. So you have these really strong relationships with these people. I don't know if anybody's been to summer camp, but it's like after a week, you're like best friends. So it's like, imagine that you're like years with these people. These people become like, these people are like my brothers. So when I think about anybody that's passed, it's like, it almost makes me sad more for their family and their friends. Like, this person is missing from your life. Like what a tragedy it is. So that's like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like, it's on a human level, it's just devastating to like lose somebody that you spend so much time with. Um, but we're there for such a greater purpose that at the end of the day, like, you might lose your life if you're in anywhere of these dangerous places. So it's like we do it for a purpose, but it's never not devastating to lose somebody.
And
And
how
it's,
how would you what do you have to say about the morality of the IDF?
I mean, just like how I explained it now, like these are kids. Like we also, I need people to realize we were not raised to think of other humans as less than us, or like to think about a life as less than us. Like we are people who celebrate life. There was like there was a video yesterday actually circulating around of a couple getting engaged in like New York City, and there was like a huge group of Israelis, and as soon as they saw them get engaged, everybody's like jumping up and down and like so excited. And it's like that is a testament of who we are. We see somebody that is about to start life together, and it's like that is how excited we are. We are those people that are excited about life, and not like, we don't think about like, let's kill these people. We think about, let's protect our people. So I think that is like, the way that the IDF is being portrayed is so far off from who we actually are. So it makes me sad, honestly, to think that so many people have this like negative connotation with the IDF, because it's just, it couldn't be further from the truth.
I heard you were physically in Israel on October 7th. Is that right?
Yeah.
You were experiencing the horror of that day firsthand before catching one of the last flights back to the States. For many of us, that day was a collective trauma, but for you, it was an immediate threat to your family and friends. How did being on the ground during those initial hours permanently alter the trajectory of your life and push you into public advocacy?
Yeah. So I would always go to Israel from Rosh Hashanah until Simchat Torah. So that was, they attacked on Simchat Torah, and that was like the day of my flight. And I remember that morning, my flight kept getting pushed back. And then my cousin, I was at my parents' house. My parents live in Harish, which is like a little bit north, sort of by Netanya. And my cousin and like a lot of my family live in Ashdod, which is in the south. And my cousin sends me a video. You know that video of Hamas in like the jeeps, and they're just like riding around with guns. She's sending me this, and she's like, they're inside. And I was freaking out, and I was like, Dad, they're inside the country. And I think my dad was trying to like calm me down, and he's like, it's okay, it's gonna be fine. But it was like such a mind-boggling thing to see, like them inside Israel just riding around like that is unheard of. It was just, I didn't even know what to think. It was so crazy. And so now I'm having to like get ready to go to the airport. We're riding to the airport. There was nothing. Like no one was on the road. It was very, very quiet, which is like, it took us 30 minutes to get to the airport, which is unheard of, to come from Harish to Ben Gurion. Like that was very fast. So it was just a dreary sort of day. And then I'm at the airport. My flight kept getting pushed back. I get on the flight and now, there's no Wi-Fi on this flight. So I'm just in the dark for like 13 hours until I land in Atlanta. And then I turn on my phone and I see everything that's sort of happening in real time. Obviously, we don't know what's going on still, but I'm freaked out. So many of my friends in the States were texting me and making sure that I was okay because obviously I had been there for a month. Everybody knows that I'm in Israel. And, a lot of people are worried for me. But then it switched very, very quickly, you know?
Yeah, and you've shared a deeply painful story about a close friend of 10 years from Oregon who texted to ensure you made it out of Israel safely, but by Thanksgiving was posting accusations of genocide online,
Oh,
forcing
yes.
forcing you to cut ties. This relational heartbreak is something so many young Jews have faced over the last few years. How did you personally process that betrayal? And what is your advice to a young person listening who feels suddenly isolated by their peers?
That betrayal was horrible. Also because not even like this was just like a 10-year-old friendship, but because even when I landed in Israel, she was the first person. I mean, I landed in Atlanta. She was the first person I was on the phone with. She's like helping me, like she's like get to the Delta counter, go get a hotel. Like she's really walking me through everything that I need to do because I was sort of stuck in Atlanta. And also after that, we were talking, FaceTiming like every single day. Like for anybody that can remember what was happening after October 7th, it felt like a death happened in the family. Like it was such a grieving time. And I was talking to her on a daily basis. So this wasn't just like a friend of 10 years. We talk here and there. And then I see what she posted. It was like somebody that I talked to on a daily basis who never had a conversation with me. So for me, not only do I feel betrayed by you, but also that's just weird. We talk on a daily basis about these things. But because you know that I'm not on social media, I got off social media. I couldn't even bear watching the news. It was just too much for me. So you knew that I was off social media, so you were posting behind my back. It was just a very weird situation where people felt this alliance to people who they do not know. Like who do you know on that side? You know what I mean? It was such a weird thing. And so I think what I would advise everybody to do if you're going through something like this is look inwards, look within our community. And that's what I've been able to do. I didn't get into advocacy after October 7th. I got into advocacy literally last in September of 2025, like, not that long ago. But I just sort of isolated myself for a while where I just felt like I didn't know who to trust. If somebody asks me where I'm from, I'm always going to say I'm Israeli. I'm always going to say I'm Jewish. I have no problem with that. But saying that on social media was too much. But look for people within our community. Go to shul, go to Chabad, go wherever we are. Like look out for your own people because that's the only people that are actually going to look out for you. And there are those few that are great friends, that I've been able to maintain. But at the end of the day, you're never going to feel quite at home unless you're, experiencing life with somebody that is sort of experiencing it in the same lens that you are. So that's what I would suggest.
I concur with what you're saying. And you've pointed out that many of your friends in the Black community are actually privately conservative or quietly supportive of Israel, but
Yeah.
they're utterly terrified to say so in public. I've noticed this with some of my Christian and African American friends too. As someone who stepped out of the corporate marketing world and explicitly chose to stop being scared, how do we help people find the courage to break through that culture of conformity?
I don't think everybody needs to be a social media person. You don't need to be online and advocating for everything that you believe in. Like
Especially
that.
because we have you there, so you're doing it for us, and we appreciate that. We can live vicariously through you.
Yes, but also it's not for everybody, some people, and honestly, sometimes I think like it would be so nice to just not care. It would be so nice to not follow politics because sometimes that can also just get into your head. But I think if people are having a conversation around you that you find is incorrect or just wrong, you should say something. And it doesn't need to be an argument, and you don't need to know all the answers. You don't need to be a debater like people are on social media. You just need to say, I actually don't agree with that. And that's point blank. That you don't need to go into XYZ, but it's like we need to make sure that people are not in an echo chamber or think that they're in an echo chamber, because I think that's what it is the loudest people are so loud on social media and in real life, and will say and do whatever they feel like is right, and no one is challenging them. No one is just saying you're actually wrong or I disagree because they feel scared. But it's like, what's going to happen to you? You can say you disagree, and that is perfectly fine. But I think we've come into this cancel culture too much, where people are just scared to have sort of um, opposing thoughts about things, which is very strange because we say we want diversity, but we can't have diversity of thought. And I think that's sort of the issue right now. It's like mainstream or nothing, and it's like, who dictates mainstream? We do. But if we don't say what we actually think, then mainstream is going to be decided for us.
And so you don't have to have an intricate conversation. You can just let people know you don't agree with that,
Yeah,
and let them know that there's other views out there, and then maybe we can go deeper into that as as we move forward. Um,
100%.
you are building a new project, I heard, called Breaking Bread with Ashira. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yeah.
It it's from the Black and Jewish podcast. You made a sharp critique of traditional alliance building, saying we don't need the old model of the pastor and the rabbi meeting for a formal dinner because they aren't the ones moving the culture anymore. I feel jealous about that, but I'll trust you on that. If the institutional leaders aren't the solution, who are the grassroots leaders you're trying to bring to the table?
So I think I view everything sort of in a marketing lens, right? So we have authority figures, right? Like people we respect, but we're not necessarily like the greater, if you don't really have like, if you don't believe in God, or like, go to shul or go to church, like you don't really see these people as like people you're going to follow. You see them as like people you're respecting, essentially. So I think it's sort of like the person that has all these businesses, a person that has a run club, you know, people who are community leaders that sort of have this, I don't really know how to say this, but like have the social media following and have this swag about them that people are like, I want to be like them, or like, that sort of feeling about them. So I think that is what I mean. And I don't mean that like these authority figures are not important, like the rabbi and the pastor, but we need people who are sort of moving the culture and moving, there's a run club leader here that has a run club every Tuesday and 100 people show up. That's sort of the type of people that we need to have conversations with, because if those are the leaders that are coming to the conversation, those 100 people may like change their mind about things. So that's sort of what we're thinking about, breaking bread, and that's the conversations that we want to have. We also would love to for it to be more than just breaking bread. We want it to be a sort of networking opportunity where we have a Jewish lawyer, doctor, and a Black business owner being able to do business together, because that is what community building is all about. It's not just about having a one-time conversation, but it's really about breaking, in the Black community, when we think about breaking bread, also it's about making money together and eating together. Whereas in the Jewish community, it's like, let's have a meal together, let's share community. And I think it works so well. And that's why we called it breaking bread. But we just want it to be more grassroots and really start a community within two communities, you know?
You revealed that your co-host was actually uninvited from a prominent Black Jewish holiday event because she was deemed too Zionist.
Mhm.
It seems some institutional groups want to facilitate a Black Jewish dialogue only if they can sweep Israel under the rug to keep the peace. Why is any cross cultural conversation between our communities completely hollow if the land of Israel is barred from the room?
Sometimes I feel like a lot of organizations will do things for the sake of doing things without really, like, trying to solve a problem. And, I don't wanna, like, talk bad about organizations, like, everybody can do whatever their heart's desires are, but I think that, when we slap something and say, "This is Black and Jewish," but we don't really, like, think deeply about what can this be or, like, where does this go long term, we're doing it in vain. So I think that's what it is, and honestly, it's, maybe it's, like, for some people, it's just to look good, to seem like they're doing something for the Jewish community, but, like, you're not helping if we're still villainizing Israel. Like, it's always gonna villainize Jews. There's no separation, and I think that people really need to get, with that. Like, there is no separation between Israel and Jews. It just is what it is, so we need to have more conversations around Israel.
With your professional background in marketing, you knew your videos would disrupt the algorithm because you don't look like what the average American expects a Zionist advocate to look like. Yet you speak, as I said, with Native American English and Native Hebrew. I guess the Israelis think that you have an accent,
Yeah.
but in English you don't. When you get messages from mothers raising mixed race Jewish children saying, "Thank you for giving my kids someone to look up to," how does that change how you view your responsibilities as a content creator?
Well, I will say, like, I don't think that, I said thank you to that message, but I also don't think that I also wrote a Substack where I said representation doesn't matter. I don't know if people have read it, and I also made a video about this, but I don't think that representation matters. If you at home tell your kids who they are, where they come from, they don't need an outside source to tell them who
I
they are.
saw that. I saw that and appreciated that very much. That was beautiful.
Because for a very long time, we didn't have TVs or radios, and people didn't need representation about who they were, you know? And I think, like, that's very flattering for somebody to say to me, and I appreciate that you enjoy my content and you feel like there's somebody for your kid, but that should all start at home. You should tell your kids where they come from, where their grandparents come from, who we are as a people, what our values are. You should teach them Torah. And I think that that's the most important thing as Jews. We don't need to look outside of ourselves to know who we are, you know? And I think for Americans, it is very surprising for them to know that I am Jewish, because obviously there aren't, Ethiopian Jews are only less than 2% of the Israeli population. Like, why would you ever know about us? You know what I mean? It's sort of, everybody thinks that Israel is all white anyways. So it's sort of like very surprising for them to know that I'm Israeli, that I'm an IDF veteran, and it sort of challenges everything that they've thought about Israel, and I always say, like, just my existence challenges a lot of people's theories and ideas about what Israel is, what Judaism is, and I'm very happy to be able to represent my people.
Looking ahead, you have an upcoming workshop with the consulate and the deputy ambassador of Ethiopia. Is that correct?
Oh, I already did it, but yes,
Oh,
yeah.
you did it. Okay. So tell us about the workshop with the consulate and the deputy ambassador of Ethiopia to speak to Ethiopian Zionists with plans to potentially fly over there. Or maybe you've done that as well.
No,
Tell us
not yet.
about that
Not
whole
yet.
situation as you step into the international diplomatic and speaking stage. And what is the message you have carried from the diaspora back to East Africa?
Yeah, so we did the workshop last month. It was with the ambassador and the deputy ambassador, which was very interesting because the deputy ambassador had called me prior, and we just had a conversation about him wanting me to talk to the group of Zionists that they have in Ethiopia. And he said to me, we called your dad. We just wanted to make sure you're his daughter, which is so funny because I said, that's so weird because my dad has not told me, but I guess the ambassador and my dad know each other from my dad working for the government back before he moved to Israel. So yeah, so that was it's so crazy because it feels like the world gets so much smaller once you connect with so many different people. But the workshop was great. I was able to talk to a lot of people who are great supporters of Israel. The only thing is that they're like, we love your videos, we just wish that they were in Amharic, which I will try to make videos in the Amharic is the Ethiopian language, for those who do not know.
Are you
And
fluent in Amharic?
I'm not fluent. I understand it like 100%. Speaking is just like a little bit difficult for me, but I understand it. So it's like, I think it's sort of, it'll just take some practice to get through like a script or something
Wow.
with somebody. Um, so they asked a lot of really great questions that I was able to answer. And some of the questions are questions that we get on our side, in America as well. It's like, what do you say when Christians tell us that Jews killed Jesus? And it's like, you wouldn't have Christianity if Jesus wasn't killed. And also Jesus was a Jew and like his followers were Jewish. And, there's so many questions that are asked that are so, I don't want to say funny, but they're almost sort of like, what the answer is to this. Always answer with truth. And that's sort of what I've left them with the workshop. I, they asked me a lot of questions about numbers and this and that. And I'm like, go look for the numbers on both sides. Look for the truth and you will find it. And I think that that is the best thing that we can do and tell the greater world is look for the truth. Don't listen to what people tell you. Go look for the numbers yourself. Go look for the pictures yourself, and you'll find everything that you are looking for. And that's sort of our best bet when we're talking to the general world, because that's truth always wins.
What challenge would you like to leave our listeners with?
This week I'm writing my Substack. I write a Substack every Friday, or like I write
We're
it for and publish it on Friday.
we're gonna put that in the show notes, by the way, so I hope that everyone appreciates your Substack.
Yes, please read it. I've been really enjoying it because it sort of gives me time to think deeply about things. And this week I thought I was going to write a Substack about there's no Judaism without Zionism. And the further I sort of I kept thinking about it and thinking about it, and then I landed at there's no Judaism without God. And I think that that's like, we just need to think deeply about things, like, let's not get drowned out by everything that everybody's telling us. Like, let's just get to the root of everything. And that's what I want to leave people with, is that we are Jews, but we wouldn't be Jews without God. And I think that that's like the most clear message. And I feel like that just sort of, for myself, it gives me hope for the next years, for the next generation, and that's maybe something that you could think about more deeply, and think about Zionism and Judaism and like, what is it about being Jewish that is so great, but what is it really?
Feel that God is certainly blessing you and guiding you as you are a blessing to our people. And I pray that you will do so for many, many more years to come in the best of health.
And
Thank you for gracing us on the Rabbi Avi Show.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
What a powerful reminder from Tali to close our conversation. There is no Judaism without God, and truth ultimately always wins. Her presence, her story, and her refusal to let external agendas dictate who she is should serve as an inspiration to every single one of us navigating these turbulent times. We will be sure to put the link to Tali's incredible weekly Substack right in our show notes, and I highly encourage all of you to go read it, subscribe, and share her clarity with your own circles. If today's hour-long conversation brought value to your week, gave you a new perspective, or strengthened your pride in our people, please take a moment to help keep these conversations going. The Rabbi Avi Show is entirely listener-supported under the umbrella of Horizontal Media. We don't answer to big corporate sponsors, we answer to you. Please visit patreon.com/horizontal media today. Your monthly support helps us produce high-quality, long-form content that brings hidden truths to light and connects the global Jewish family. That's patreon.com/horizontal media. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support and for spreading the word. And until next time, may we continue to seek truth, build genuine community, and walk with courage.